Shabbat shalom. Oh wow, got a strength today. That's good. We like to think of our Torah as a timeless gift, whose lessons and wisdom provide enduring instruction for the way in which we hope to live our lives ethically and morally. In many ways, this is absolutely true. And occasionally we come across sections that illustrate for us that our sacred text truly does come from a different time in a seemingly different world. Parshat Mishpatim begins with the shocking instruction of how the Israelite people should properly acquire and treat and sell their slaves. For a people who just endured hundreds of years of slavery, it certainly seems odd that they so quickly receive laws about enslaving other people. Even more so, it is that God is the one who redeemed them from slavery, and God is the one who is giving us this instruction of how we should enslave others. It is challenging to do, but I'm going to encourage us to withhold our judgment for just a moment in order for the Torah to influence us throughout every generation. We have to be careful to avoid anachronisms. That is, we cannot use our modern sensibilities to analyze and scrutinize an ancient society. So let us set the scene. The Israelites are camped out in front of Mount Sinai. They have just accepted the covenant with the famous words, Na'aseh v'nishma, all that God has spoken, we will do, and we will understand later. The 10 Commandments, or the 10 utterances, were just heard aloud directly from God. And frightened by their revelation at Mount Sinai, the Israelites ask Moses to act as their intermediary between God. And then Parshat Mishpatim picks up with a lengthy list of commandments that are often referred in our tradition as the Holiness Code. This code of mitzvot includes a variety of laws related to slavery, personal injury, loans, property damage, much more. In today's academic study of the Bible, critical text scholars are quick to suggest that it is very likely that our Holiness Code was based off of the Code of Hammurabi, which was written circa 1800 BCE, nearly 1,300 years before the 5 books of Moses. It is most clear to these scholars, as both of our texts read, if there is a fatality, you shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, a hand for hand, and so on. This sort of societal sharing was not uncommon in the ancient world. Civilizations and people taking and reshaping each other's writings and innovations. What is truly remarkable is the comparison we can make between the transmission of these two texts. If we want to see Hammurabi's code in person, we can book a flight to Paris, find it sitting in the Louvre under high-tech security glass and surrounded by security officers. And where do we find our text? Cantor Meisner just lifted it just a few moments ago. It is our Eitz Chaim. It is a living text. Our temple has dozens, or maybe not dozens, has a dozen handwritten scrolls. It is a living tradition, tangible and always in our midst. What is it about our Torah that has allowed it to endure for literally thousands of years, outlasting other texts that have influenced it, rulers who have tried to oppress it, and entire civilizations? Some say that this is the presence of God at work. Others might say our longevity is due to an inflexible scribal structure that has been passed down from generation to generation. The ancient rabbis give us another explanation. They frequently wrote about the seemingly infinite lessons and parables and teachings that the Torah could convey. Some refer to it as the Shivim Panim B'Torah, the 70 faces of Torah. Others compare the Torah to looking into the face of a complexly cut diamond, as it reflects back differently for each person. And depending on where each person is positioned around the diamond's reflection has multiple truths for each individual. As we began Parshat Mishpatim with the discussion of human slavery, we recognize that not every commandment seems like a precious and enduring gem. Though one such law that seems to jump off the parchment in this week's Parsha is the commandment, do not mistreat a stranger or oppress them, for you were strangers in Egypt. Do not mistreat or oppress. Why the redundancy? Traditionally, it is thought that every letter, every line, every crown in the Torah has meaning. Therefore, there are not superfluous words, but rather an indicator that this concept should be more deeply explored. So we ask in the commandment, do not mistreat a stranger or oppress them, what would it mean to mistreat someone versus to oppress them? The sages believed that oppression was in regards to some financial or economic wrongdoing, while mistreatment would be along the lines of verbal abuse or humiliation. The sages further expound that mistreatment is actually far worse than oppression. That is, causing shame is a graver transgression than monetary misconduct. In the case of oppression, one could always restore the damages taken from an individual, but unjust words cannot ever truly be taken back. Parshat Mishpatim includes 2 of the 36 different times that the Torah warns against the wrongdoing of the stranger, making it one of the most commanded mitzvot in our tradition. We could make an argument that it is actually one of the main theses of Judaism. In the course of these 36 repetitions, the exact wording takes a few different forms. In Vayikra, the text reads, when a stranger lives with you in your land, do not mistreat them. The stranger living with you must be treated as one of your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were strangers in Egypt. The rabbinic commentator Nachmanides writes that this commandment to treat the stranger the same as the native born encompasses 2 primary principles. First, there seems to be a political dimension. The stranger is powerless, not surrounded by friends or family or the comforts of home. There is no one to come to their defense. The second represents a psychological vulnerability. The stranger is alone and therefore feels alone. We are told that God decided to free the Israelites from slavery because he heard their cry. He felt their pain. We too are commanded to hear the cry of the stranger, and admittedly, it is far easier to see the stranger physically and politically as the other than it is to feel the psychological pain that they carry with them. The Torah is impressing upon us, both through the overall arc of its storyline and directly through commandments like this, that to be a stranger, to be a Jew, is to be a stranger. And that inevitably, over and over again, we will forget this. So we must constantly be reminded. The first of our forefathers, Avraham, was commanded to leave his father's land so as to start a great nation. The history of the Jewish people begins when our patriarch is commanded to become a stranger. Even more so, this concept truly transcends our biblical tradition. Even as we live in great comfort here in Canada, we as Jews know what it is like to exist as strangers in the land. Both in our homes and in our government, many are debating the place of the other, the refugee, the principles of Canadian immigration. In Israel, some 50,000 asylum seekers are on the verge of being expelled to countries they originally fled from or facing jail time within the state. I do not mean to suggest or imply what the correct decision should be. That is for each individual to come to understand for themselves. However, the fact that we could have such a conversation purely through the lens of the Torah shows just why it is still so relevant today. And perhaps why the Code of Hammurabi is under security glass. Something is of use as long as it is relevant. Certainly, the laws governing slavery are not moral or just or seemingly relevant in our modern world. The holiness code of Parshat Mishpatim might not seem fully useful or relevant in informing our lives in the here and now. Though, without a doubt, the Torah remains a timeless gift, not necessarily pertinent to every contemporary issue, but an appropriate lens through which we can discuss our age and every age that has come before and that will continue to come hereafter. From this parsha alone, we can see what the sages mean when they refer to the Torah's seemingly endless lessons. An ancient inheritance with Shavi'im Panim, with 70 faces, the Torah a radiant diamond in which many times over we can see our own face. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.